Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at Sally Rooney's Intermezzo.
Okay.
It's based on this book review that you sent me.
Yeah.
And I'm already kind of intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're a big fan of Rooney's work, so this should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like Rooney is maybe taking a bit of a turn
Oh, really?
with Intermezzo. She's known for capturing that millennial angst,
Right.
normal people and
Conversations with friends.
conversations with friends, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this seems like a new direction.
Interesting. Okay, so set the scene for us.
Sure.
What's the basic premise?
Okay, so Intermezzo, it centers around these two brothers,
Okay.
Ivan and Peter Kubek. And they're in present-day Ireland.
Okay.
And they're dealing with the aftermath of their father's death.
Oh, wow.
And each brother's taking a very different approach to dealing with this grief,
I see.
which I suspect brings up some, interesting dynamics
Yeah, for sure.
between them.
It sounds like a classic Rooney setup.
Yeah.
But with a twist.
Right.
Right. So instead of focusing on female characters like she has in the past,
Exactly.
here we have these two male protagonists
Mm-hmm.
who are dealing with grief, with family ties,
Yeah.
and as the review hinted at, some intriguing relationships with some significant age gaps.
Yes, you pick up on a key point there.
Yeah.
I think Rooney's exploration of male vulnerability
Okay.
is something that really sets this book apart
Interesting.
from her previous work. And in Intermezzo, she really seems to be digging into how men process or perhaps don't process their emotions and past traumas.
Right. And, it makes me wonder if she's intentionally challenging those traditional stoic masculine ideals.
Yeah.
Is she suggesting that vulnerability is actually a strength,
That's a great question.
especially when you're faced with grief?
Yeah, I think that gets to the heart of what Rooney is exploring here.
Okay.
There's definitely this philosophical current
Yeah.
running through the narrative, which makes us consider, what does masculinity mean
Wow.
in today's world?
Okay, so it's not just a story about two brothers grieving. It's also like a commentary
Exactly.
on societal expectations of men.
Precisely, yeah. And
Wow.
the way that she uses these characters to dissect these expectations is really clever.
Okay.
So, for instance, we have Ivan,
Okay.
the younger brother, who's 22.
Mm-hmm.
He's a former chess prodigy,
Okay.
which already hints at a certain intellectual intensity
Right.
and maybe even emotional detachment.
Interesting. So maybe chess is almost symbolic of how he approaches life?
Ooh, I like that.
Strategizing and calculating rather than being emotionally expressive.
I like where you're going with that, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And then we have Peter,
Okay.
the older brother. He's 32.
Okay.
He's a human rights lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So on the surface, he might seem more emotionally engaged.
Yeah, because of his job.
Right,
Yeah.
because of his work. But perhaps there's a different kind of guardedness there.
Yeah, maybe he channels all his emotion into work.
Yeah.
And there's nothing left for his personal life.
It could be.
The review did mention some complicated relationships.
Yes, it did. And
Yeah.
this is where those age dynamics become particularly fascinating.
All right.
So Ivan starts a relationship with Margaret, who's 36.
Oh, wow.
And then Peter,
Okay.
he's juggling relationships with his younger girlfriend, Naomi,
Okay.
and his ex, Sylvia.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot to unpack. The age gaps immediately introduce this power imbalance.
Yes, definitely.
And it makes me wonder if Rooney is using these relationships to explore something more than just romance.
I absolutely agree. It feels like she's using these relationships as a lens
Oh, wow.
to examine broader societal issues.
Okay.
Like how age and experience influence those power dynamics,
Right.
especially in the context of love and grief.
So how do these relationships play out in the context of the brothers' grief?
That's a great question.
Do they find solace in these connections, or do they kind of exacerbate? Mm-hmm.
The turmoil that they're already facing.
That's something I'm eager to explore further because the review hinted at a lot of unspoken tension
Okay.
and baggage between the brothers.
Right?
And I imagine these romantic entanglements just add another layer of complexity.
Yeah, it sounds like Rooney is creating this intricate web
Yes.
of relationships
Mm-hmm.
where no one is truly innocent
right.
or wholly at fault.
Yes,
Right. Everyone is grappling with their own internal struggles,
exactly.
which inevitably kind of spills over into their interactions with others.
That's a great observation. It seems like Rooney is really interested in exploring
Yeah.
those gray areas of human interaction,
Yeah.
showing us that relationships are rarely simple or straightforward.
So we have these complex characters. They're navigating grief, they're questioning societal expectations, and they're forming these unconventional relationships.
Right.
It's a classic Rooney, but it sounds like she's taking her exploration of human connection to a whole new level. I couldn't agree more. And what makes it even more intriguing
Yeah.
is that, according to the review, Rooney's writing style itself has evolved in Intermezzo.
Really?
Yeah, so she's using techniques like alternating perspectives,
Okay.
internal monologues, philosophical reflections to create this more
Oh,
fragmented and introspective narrative.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I've always admired her prose.
Yeah.
It's very sharp, almost clinical.
Yes.
But it sounds like she's taking a more nuanced approach here.
Exactly, and by delving deeper into the characters' internal worlds,
Right.
she allows us to experience those emotional journeys in a more intimate
Yeah.
and perhaps even unsettling way.
It makes me think about the title Intermezzo.
Okay.
It suggests a pause or a period of reflection,
Yeah.
maybe even a sense of uncertainty.
Right.
Perhaps that's what she's trying to evoke in the reader, this feeling of being suspended in a moment of transition,
Yeah.
grappling with those complex emotions and trying to find meaning.
I think you've hit on something really crucial there.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the heart of what makes Rooney such a compelling writer.
Okay.
She doesn't shy away from the messiness of human existence.
Right.
She embraces it, she dissects it,
Yeah.
and she forces us to confront our own vulnerabilities and uncertainties along the way.
Yeah. And that's where the deep dive truly begins, right?
Yes.
It's not just about understanding the plot or the characters.
Yeah.
It's about grappling with those bigger questions
Exactly.
that her work raises about ourselves, our relationships, and the
Yeah.
world around us.
You've summed it up perfectly.
This is already making me want to reread her earlier books.
Yeah.
Just to see if I can spot those early hints
That's a great idea.
of this philosophical exploration.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the brothers in a little more detail.
Okay, sure.
The review mentioned their contrasting personalities
Right.
as a key point of interest.
Yes.
What can you tell us about Ivan's journey specifically?
Okay, so let's start with Ivan.
Okay.
He's 22, a
Right.
former chess prodigy,
Right.
and now he's in a relationship with Margaret, a woman 14 years his senior.
Wow. Okay.
It's a dynamic that immediately raises questions about power,
Yeah.
about mentorship, and perhaps even a subconscious search for a maternal figure.
That's a really interesting observation. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah.
The potential for a maternal element in their dynamic.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's seeking guidance and stability
Right.
in a time of immense upheaval.
I agree, and it's interesting to consider how this age gap might influence his grief process.
Right.
Does he feel comfortable expressing his vulnerability to someone older,
Yeah.
who's presumably more experienced with loss?
That's a great question. I'm also curious about how the review framed their relationship.
Okay.
Did it come across as predatory or exploitative?
The review didn't really delve into those specifics,
Okay.
but it did highlight the nuanced and complex portrayal of their connection.
Right.
It seems like Rooney avoids easy judgments. Instead, she chooses to explore the intricacies of their dynamic
Okay.
with sensitivity and depth.
Which is, a hallmark of Rooney's writing.
Exactly.
She's always been interested in kind of pushing the boundaries of
Right.
conventional relationships
Yeah.
and showing us, those messy realities behind closed doors.
Right. And I suspect that this exploration of an age gap relationship in Intermezzo is less about sensationalism
Okay.
and more about prompting us to confront
Right.
our own preconceived notions about love,
Yeah.
about power,
Yeah.
and what constitutes an acceptable or unacceptable connection.
So it's almost like she's inviting us to look beyond the surface
Exactly.
and consider those unique circumstances that might lead people to seek solace and connection in unexpected places.
Precisely. And that's one of the things I find most compelling about her work.
Okay.
She doesn't offer easy answers or moral judgments.
Right.
She presents these complex situations
Right.
and lets the reader kind of grapple with the ambiguity.
So while Ivan's journey is clearly intertwined with his relationship with Margaret, it's not a simple case of cause and effect,
Right.
right? There are these layers of grief, personal ambition,
Yeah.
and perhaps even a desire to break free from societal expectations at play.
I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And it's this multifaceted approach to character development that makes Intermezzo so captivating.
Okay.
We're not just following a plot.
Right.
We're delving into the intricate workings of the human psyche.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about complex characters, we can't forget about Peter.
Right.
His story seems to be about navigating these different versions of himself.
Absolutely.
Would you say?
Yeah, you have Peter who's trying to reconcile his past with his present.
Right.
And it seems like his relationships with Naomi and Sylvia represent these two different facets of his identity.
It's as if he's caught between this yearning for, youthful freedom with Naomi.
Okay.
And this pull toward the stability and familiarity of his past with Sylvia. Could it be that he's using these relationships to try and outrun his grief?
Okay.
Seeking solace in distractions rather than facing those emotions head on.
That's a really interesting point. But could it also be that Peter,
Yeah.
unlike Ivan, is actually trying to find different ways to engage with his grief?
I see what you mean.
Maybe those different relationships offer him these different avenues for processing that loss.
Perhaps Naomi represents a chance for him to tap back into a sense of joy
Okay.
and spontaneity that he might feel is slipping away as he gets older.
Right.
And then Sylvia represents a connection to a time before the loss,
Okay.
offering him a sense of continuity and grounding.
It's almost like he's trying to piece together a fragmented sense of self
Yeah.
in the aftermath of this loss.
Right.
And, going back to the idea of Rooney challenging traditional masculinity, perhaps Peter's exploration of these different relationship dynamics is his way of confronting his own vulnerabilities and emotional needs.
I think you've hit on something quite profound there.
Yeah.
It seems like both brothers, in their own way, are grappling with what it means to be a man
Right.
in a world that expects them to suppress their emotions.
Right.
Ivan seeks guidance and stability. Peter seeks different forms of connection and release.
And it's fascinating how Rooney uses those very specific relationship dynamics,
Right.
especially the age gaps, to highlight these unspoken societal expectations.
Absolutely.
It's subtle, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, it's woven through the narrative.
Yeah, it's like she's holding up a mirror to our own societal norms and asking us to question whether those norms are actually serving us well,
Exactly.
especially when it comes to understanding how men process grief and loss.
And it makes you wonder if this more philosophical approach is a natural progression
Yeah.
for her as a writer.
She's always been masterful at capturing the intricacies of human relationships.
Yes.
But in Intermezzo, it feels like she's taking a step back.
Right.
And she's looking at the broader societal forces at play.
Exactly.
I'm really curious about the philosophical ideas that the review mentioned.
Okay.
What are some of the concepts?
So based on the review, it seems like Intermezzo touches on themes of existentialism,
Okay.
where characters grapple with questions of meaning and purpose
Right.
in a world that often feels chaotic and absurd.
That makes sense, especially considering, they're dealing with the loss of their father.
Exactly.
They're forced to confront the fragility of life
Yeah.
and the uncertainty of what comes next.
Precisely. And it also seems like Rooney is delving into the idea of individual versus collective identity.
Interesting.
The brothers are clearly shaped by their family history
Right.
and their shared experiences,
Of course.
but they're also forging their own paths
Yeah.
and trying to define themselves as individuals.
It's that classic push and pull.
Yes.
Between wanting to belong and wanting to break free.
Exactly.
And I imagine their father's death acts as a catalyst for this exploration of selfhood.
Yeah.
They're no longer defined solely as sons. They're forced to navigate the world as individuals,
Right.
grappling with their own desires and ambitions.
It's fascinating how she weaves those philosophical threads into the fabric of the story.
Yeah.
She uses those threads to illuminate the characters' inner struggles
Right. Yeah.
and the choices that they make.
It's not just background noise. It's an integral part of their journey.
Right.
It's done so subtly, too.
It is, yeah.
It's not like she's hitting us over the head with these ideas.
No.
It's more like she's inviting us to engage with them on a deeper level.
Yeah, to draw our own conclusions.
Speaking of engaging with the text, I'm really curious about the stylistic shift that the review mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Can we delve a little deeper into how Rooney uses techniques like alternating perspectives and internal monologues
Yeah.
to create this sense of a fragmented narrative?
So the review highlighted how Intermezzo kind of moves away from a traditional linear structure.
Right.
And instead opts for this more fragmented and introspective approach.
Okay.
The alternating perspectives, for example, allow us to experience the story through the eyes of both brothers.
Right.
and gain these intimate insights into their emotional landscapes.
It's almost like we're getting multiple pieces of the same puzzle, but those pieces don't necessarily fit together seamlessly.
Right.
It creates this sense of disorientation and ambiguity, which mirrors the characters' own experiences as they navigate their grief and grapple with their identities.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah.
And the internal monologues further enhance this sense of fragmentation.
Okay.
So we're privy to the characters' innermost thoughts and doubts.
Right.
Often in this stream of consciousness style that feels both raw and revealing.
It's like we're eavesdropping on their internal conversations.
Exactly.
Right. Witnessing that messy, often contradictory nature of human thought.
Yeah, and I imagine this approach can be both fascinating and challenging for the reader.
Right, because it requires a greater level of active engagement with the text.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
This stylistic shift demands more from the reader.
Okay.
You know, it's not just about passively following a plot.
Right.
It's about actively piecing together the fragments of the narrative, navigating those internal worlds and drawing your own conclusions.
It sounds like she's really pushing the boundaries of traditional storytelling.
She is.
Challenging readers to engage with the text on a deeper, more intellectual level.
And it's a risk that seems to pay off.
Okay.
While the review did mention that some readers might find the structure disorienting or even frustrating, it also praised her ability to create a deeply immersive and emotionally resonant experience.
So it's almost like she's saying, if you're willing to put in the effort to lean into the ambiguity and embrace the challenge, you'll be rewarded with a truly profound and transformative reading experience.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Wow.
And it makes you wonder if this stylistic evolution is a sign of her maturing as a writer.
Yeah.
You know, moving toward a more complex and experimental form of storytelling.
I'm inclined to agree, and it's exciting to think about where this evolution might take her in future works.
Yeah.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
We still have a lot more to unpack with Intermezzo.
Right.
Especially those potential criticisms that the review hinted at.
Okay.
We've talked about how her stylistic choices might challenge some readers.
Right.
Now let's address another potential criticism, the less prominent romantic element.
Right. So Rooney is often categorized as a romance novelist.
Yeah.
And while relationships are clearly central to her work, it seems like Intermezzo might not deliver that same level of romantic intensity.
Interesting.
As her previous books.
What do you think about this shift, especially for readers who come to Rooney for her love stories?
Well, it could go either way.
Right.
Some readers might be disappointed by the lack of a central love story.
Right, especially if they're expecting, a repeat of Normal People.
Right, exactly.
Or Conversations with Friends.
Exactly.
On the other hand, this shift away from a predominantly romantic focus could be seen as a sign of her growth as a writer.
That's a really interesting point.
Maybe she's deliberately challenging those genre expectations.
Yeah.
Choosing to explore human connection in a broader, more nuanced way.
Perhaps by shifting the focus away from purely romantic relationships.
Okay.
She's creating space for a deeper exploration of other forms of intimacy and connection.
Interesting.
Like the bonds between siblings or the relationships individuals have with themselves.
And it's not to say that romance is entirely absent from Intermezzo.
Exactly.
We still have those intriguing relationships with those significant age gaps.
Yes.
Which, as we discussed, could be interpreted as explorations of power, mentorship, and unconventional forms of intimacy.
And those relationships, despite not necessarily being the central focus,
Yeah.
could still offer those moments of emotional intensity and complexity.
Right. It's almost like she's saying, yes, love and desire are important.
Right.
But they're not the only driving forces behind our actions and motivations.
Precisely. And by widening the scope of her exploration, she might be inviting us to consider the multifaceted nature of human connection.
It's a bold move.
It is.
And it might alienate some readers who are looking for a more traditional love story.
Right.
But for those who are open to a more nuanced and challenging exploration, Intermezzo could be a truly rewarding read.
I think you've hit on something crucial here.
Yeah.
It's all about reader expectations.
Yeah.
And being open to the possibility that she might be taking us in a new direction.
Right.
One that pushes beyond the confines of a single genre.
Right.
And delves deeper into the complexities of human experience.
And it wouldn't be a Rooney novel without a healthy dose of emotional complexity, right?
You're right.
The review hinted at the book's ability to elicit those deep, visceral responses from readers.
Yes, it did.
Despite the potential shift in focus.
The review specifically praised her talent for capturing those subtle emotional shifts.
Right.
Those unspoken tensions that exist beneath the surface of everyday interactions.
She has this incredible ability to make us feel the weight of unspoken words. The
Yes.
lingering effects of past hurts and those quiet moments of longing and despair.
It's like she's holding a magnifying glass to the human heart,
Yeah.
revealing its intricacies and vulnerabilities with such precision and sensitivity.
And what's fascinating is that she achieves this level of emotional depth
Right.
without resorting to melodrama
Exactly.
or sensationalism.
Her writing is often understated, even minimalist at times.
Right.
But the emotions she evokes are incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And they linger long after you finish the last page.
It's a testament to her skill as a writer.
It is.
Her ability to capture the essence of human experience with such economy and grace.
Absolutely. And it makes me wonder if this less is more approach might actually be more effective in conveying the subtleties of grief and the complexities of those relationships than a more overtly dramatic style.
I think you're onto something there.
Yeah.
By allowing space for silence and reflection, by focusing on those subtle gestures and unspoken words, she creates a sense of intimacy and vulnerability that draws the reader in.
Exactly.
And makes them feel like a participant in those emotional journeys.
And it speaks to her confidence as a writer.
Okay.
Her willingness to trust the reader to fill in the gaps.
Right.
She's not spoon-feeding us emotions. She's inviting us to experience them alongside the characters.
It's a truly immersive and transformative reading experience.
It is.
And one that I suspect will stay with readers long after they finish the book.
I couldn't agree more. And it makes me even more excited to delve into Intermezzo myself.
Yeah.
To see how she navigates these stylistic shifts and thematic explorations, and to experience firsthand the emotional impact of her writing.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the characters and the themes to the stylistic choices and those potential criticisms. But there's one last point I want to touch on before we wrap up.
Okay.
The possibility of Intermezzo being adapted for the screen.
Yes. That's an intriguing possibility.
Given the success of Normal People and Conversations with Friends as TV series, there's been a lot of speculation about whether Intermezzo might follow suit.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a fascinating prospect, but I can't help but wonder how such an introspective and nuanced novel would translate to a visual medium.
Right.
It's not exactly packed with action or plot twists.
Right.
So it would require a very specific type of filmmaker.
It would.
To capture the essence of the story.
You're right. It would need to be someone who understands the power of subtle storytelling.
Okay.
Someone who can convey emotion through visuals and atmosphere.
Right.
Rather than relying solely on dialogue or plot-driven action.
It's almost like the challenge would be to find a visual language for those unspoken emotions.
Yeah.
Those lingering glances. Those moments of quiet contemplation.
Right.
That make Rooney's writing so captivating.
I agree. It would require a director with a keen eye for detail.
Yeah, okay.
Someone who can capture the nuances of human interaction.
Right.
And the unspoken tensions that simmer beneath the surface.
It makes you think about the casting choices, too.
Yeah.
The actors would need to be able to convey so much through their expressions, their body language, even their silences.
Absolutely.
It's not a project for actors who are used to relying on grand gestures or melodramatic pronouncements.
It would require a certain level of subtlety and restraint.
It's a daunting task.
It is.
But also an incredibly exciting one.
Yes.
And it speaks to the power of her writing, that it can inspire such creative ambition.
Right.
And spark such passionate discussions about its potential for adaptation.
It's a testament to her ability to tap into something universal.
Yeah.
Something that transcends the boundaries of the page.
Right.
And speaks to the complexities of human experience.
Exactly.
In a way that resonates deeply with readers and viewers alike.
This whole discussion has made me even more eager to experience Intermezzo myself.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the evolution of her writing, her exploration of these complex themes, and her willingness to push the boundaries of traditional storytelling.
I share your enthusiasm. And I have a feeling that you, our listener, might be feeling similarly intrigued.
Yes. Before we move on to our final thoughts, there's one question that's been swirling in my mind throughout this whole conversation.
Graham, all ears.
Well, we've talked about the potential for a film adaptation, and we've discussed the unique challenges that such a project would present. But the question that keeps nagging at me is this. If Intermezzo were to be adapted for the screen, which brother's story would be the primary focus?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And one that I'm not sure has an easy answer. Both brothers have such compelling stories to tell.
Right.
And their journeys are so intricately intertwined
Right.
that it's hard to imagine separating them completely.
But if we had to choose,
Okay.
if we had to pick one brother's story to take center stage, who would it be?
On the one hand, Ivan's relationship with Margaret,
Okay.
with that significant age gap,
Yeah.
and his potential for exploring themes of power and mentorship
Right.
and unconventional intimacy might have more immediate appeal to a wider audience.
Okay.
It's a story that could spark a lot of discussion and debate,
Right.
which, let's face it, is something that often translates well to the screen.
There's a certain dramatic tension inherent in that type of relationship.
Yeah.
And it could be fascinating to see how it unfolds on screen.
But then you have Peter
Right.
with his internal struggles, his juggling act between past and present,
Yeah.
his attempts to reconcile those different versions of himself.
Right.
His story might be less outwardly dramatic, but it could be incredibly powerful and resonant if done right.
Yeah, his journey is all about those subtle emotional shifts.
Exactly.
You know, those unspoken yearnings, those moments of quiet introspection that Rooney captures so beautifully.
It would be a challenge to translate those nuances to the screen,
Right.
but it could also be incredibly rewarding.
It really is a tough call.
It is.
Both brothers offer such rich material for exploration, and I think it ultimately comes down to the filmmaker's vision
Right.
and their ability to capture the essence of Rooney's storytelling.
And perhaps that's the beauty of her work.
Yeah.
You know, it sparks such passionate discussion.
Right.
It inspires such imaginative possibilities.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with so many questions to ponder.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so rewarding.
Right.
It's not just about summarizing a book. It's about engaging with it on a deeper level, exploring its themes, analyzing its stylistic choices, and considering its potential for adaptation and interpretation.
It's a reminder that great literature is not just about, consuming a story.
Right.
It's about engaging in a conversation.
Yeah.
Both with the text itself and with other readers who are grappling with the same questions and ideas.
I love that. And it brings us back to you, our listeners. We've shared our thoughts and interpretations.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the most rewarding part of this deep dive is hearing your perspective.
Absolutely. What resonates with you about Intermezzo?
Right.
Are you drawn to Ivan's exploration of unconventional relationships?
Okay.
Or Peter's struggles with self-identity?
Right.
Does Rooney's exploration of male vulnerability challenge your preconceived notions about masculinity?
That's a great question.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And to add another layer to this conversation, we'd love to hear your take on that adaptation question.
Yes.
If you were in the director's chair,
Okay.
which brother's story would you choose to highlight?
Right.
What visual elements would you use to capture the essence of Rooney's writing?
This is where your creativity comes in.
Right.
Imagine the possibilities, the casting choices, the soundtrack, the overall mood and atmosphere.
It's exciting.
Would you lean into the philosophical aspects?
Okay.
Or focus on that raw emotional intensity of the characters' relationships?
And speaking of your creative input, I can't help but think about the ending of our deep dive.
Okay.
You know, usually we wrap things up with a thought-provoking question or a challenge for our listeners.
Yeah.
But this time, I'm curious to hear what you think would be a fitting conclusion.
I love that idea.
To our exploration of Intermezzo.
Instead of us providing the final word, we're turning it over to you.
Yeah.
What question, what challenge, what lingering thought would you leave with your fellow listeners who are about to embark on their own journey with Intermezzo?
It's a way of acknowledging that this deep dive is not an endpoint, but rather a starting point for a broader conversation.
Exactly.
And we, the hosts, are just as eager to learn from you as you are to learn from us.
That collaborative spirit is really at the heart of what makes the deep dive so special.
Okay.
It's not about one person having all the answers.
Yes.
It's about coming together to explore ideas, to share insights, and expand our understanding of the world through great literature.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Intermezzo, we invite you to take the reins, share your thoughts, your questions, your creative visions, and help us create a truly collaborative and enriching experience.
Because ultimately, that's what makes exploring literature so rewarding.
Yeah.
It's a journey we take together.
Right.
Discovering new insights and connecting with each other along the way.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the possibilities and embark on your own deep dive into Intermezzo.
Happy reading.
Happy reading, everyone.